So, as jury deliberations commence, the Secret Service is reportedly preparing for the possibility of Donald Trump, a former and likely future president, going to jail. This is America. Really? The show starts now. So, as that Manhattan jury mulls over their decision in the sham scam Trump hush money criminal case, the Secret Service is reportedly preparing for the worst, the prospect of Donald Trump possibly going to jail. Now, this possibility is what liberal wet dreams are made of, and that's pretty sick. But what would that even look like? A former and likely future president going to jail? Well, according to CBS, New York corrections would have to not only safeguard Donald Trump in that situation, but also the Secret Service agents tasked with protecting the former president, protection he is guaranteed for life. Where the former president would be ordered to serve time is still unknown, if he'd serve at all, though some speculate it could be the Rikers Island complex, though that is also very unlikely. It's all just really sad. But President Trump is enduring all of this crap with a brave face and unrelenting fight. Unlike their guy on the left, Donald Trump does best when he's against the wall and under attack. He's a fighter and he will fight to the death. But what is the likelihood this thing goes to a legit jail sentence? Well, let me bring in former Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Kash Patel, who I have so many questions for. Cash, today is a historic day, probably for all the wrong reasons. And I want to just jump right into what I think is the most shocking and surprising thing of the day we've learned so far about these jury instructions, that they don't have to come to a unanimous decision, that it could be for this way, for this way, for that way. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not smart enough to be one, but that sounds very peculiar to me. Please break this down.
You don't have to be a lawyer, and you're smarter than everyone on Alvin Bragg's prosecution team combined and the judge. These guys have rigged this since jump. And look, I used to be a public defender and a national security prosecutor. I was in court when the prosecution conjured up this jury instruction last Monday. I was with the president, and I couldn't believe what I heard. They literally said, you, the jury, don't have to agree, do not have to agree on the illicit conduct and the findings that you make in the jury room to find Donald Trump guilty. I had never heard something like that, because this thing that we call a unanimous jury verdict is based on the Constitution. And this judge just shredded the Constitution and said, basically, choose your own adventure, jurors. If 3 of you go this way and 4 of you go that way and another 2 go the other way, you can still find Donald Trump guilty, and I will uphold the verdict. I've literally never heard of something like that. I didn't even think something like that was even possible by these guys, but I guess I was proven wrong.
So, forgive me if this is a dumb question, but does that even make a hung jury a possibility if they necessarily don't have to agree on everything? Is that still possible at this point?
Well, a hung jury is possible if the following happens in this scenario. One juror says, I'm not convicting Donald Trump of anything. And the other 11 say, I'm going to convict him of this, that, the other thing, whatever, counts 12, 14, 17, A, B, and C. You need one juror to say not guilty across the board, or you need one juror to say, I have reasonable doubt, and I'm not going to go in with you other jurors, and that's a hung jury.
This is so wild to me, but it feels like, and we don't know the motivation, we can only speculate on the motivation, but it feels like the left and everybody aligned with the left, everybody that's in cahoots here to rig this thing, it feels like they just want to be able to say that Donald Trump is a convicted felon. They don't really care if it gets overturned, which, I would imagine that would be the only scenario if there's any shred of decency left in this country. But it seems like by giving this buffet of options here and this way this whole thing went down, it seems like they just want to find a way to say that he's a convicted felon. Does that seem correct?
That's the headline they want. Donald Trump, convicted felon, can't be president. They know the appeals process will reverse any conviction because it's totally baseless, but that appeals process will take 2 to 3 years. They don't care about that. This judge has gone out of his way not only to give instructions that I've never even heard of, but gone out of his way to literally kick everyone out of the courtroom, including myself, when I heard evidence of exoneration. He was not even allowing the jury to listen to evidence of exoneration. And when Michael Cohen stumbled repeatedly for the prosecution as a lead witness, the judge repeatedly broke in and chimed in to save their case. So there is a litany of not just of reasonable doubt, but what we call reversible error in this case. But you're spot on. They don't care about any of that. They want to be the ones that say, I got Trump. He's a convicted felon. Now we can go on the campaign trail with this Biden orchestrated prosecution and say, America, don't vote for a convicted felon.
There's so much there I want to get into, just talking about the double standards here that are up the wazoo and around the corner. But, again, going back to this. Now, I would imagine if you were a judge that's gotten yourself to this high position, regardless of what we think about this judge in this case, if you were this judge, do you care about your legacy? Because if this gets overturned on appeal, which it should, as you mentioned, does he even care about that? I mean, is his motivation to get Trump? Is that supersede his motivation to be a respectable judge? Like, what is next for a judge in this kind of situation? Has he embarrassed himself, or in New York, has he made himself like a celebrity?
He's chasing the legacy that he wants. He's chasing the legacy that's destroying the Constitution to achieve a political end in front of his courtroom. And that will make him a superhero to the minority of radical left-wing lunatics that support this baseless kind of two-tier system of justice. Look, it's so bad that we know that his daughter is making tens of millions of dollars from the information flowing out of his courtroom. We know that if he's convicted, Donald Trump, his daughter will likely make $100 million. And there's actually a rule in the state of New York governing judges that forbids it. Most states don't have that rule. New York forbids it. This judge stayed on. You want to know what's even worse? This judge's wife worked for Letitia James at the Attorney General's office. I mean, you literally cannot create a more rigged system of justice, which is why Donald Trump just went out to the courtroom and said Mother Teresa couldn't beat these charges. He's right. I mean, you cannot have a more slanted scope and a more unconstitutional prosecution. But the legacy that this judge wants to leave the world is that he was the one that got Trump, and that's what Bragg wants to say, and that's what Joe Biden wants to participate in. And they're buying it all up. They've paid him, and I've asked Congress to go out there and subpoena this judge's wife, this judge's daughter, and every prosecutor in the case, and get every meeting they had with the Biden White House and how much of our federal taxpayer money went into this bogus prosecution. I'm waiting for anyone at Congress to issue one subpoena to do anything.
Well, my money's not on Congress to do much of anything. It seems like the only thing they're good for these days are, going back and forth about eyelashes and bad built bodies. I mean, that seems to be the extent of what they deliver for us. They're all embarrassing, in my opinion. But I want to talk about that daughter again. We know that Donald Trump, because of the unconstitutional gag order and his team, they haven't been really able to flesh out exactly what the conflict is there. And I know a lot of Americans that have been following this, but maybe not as closely as you and I have. They hear about this daughter and as you said, making money off of this. Can you explain that to folks that are maybe heard a little bit about it, but they're not familiar with the details of how that's all working?
Sure. It's a theme, apparently. If you prosecute Donald Trump and you're the prosecutors in the case or their family, you can run around making money off of it. No, nothing's going to happen to you. They got caught in Georgia doing it. And what's happening in New York is the judge's daughter she's the CEO or president of a publications firm that is hired by the likes of Adam Schiff. And that firm takes information that is directly flowing out of that courtroom, her father's courtroom, and they use it to campaign and put out publicity materials. And they charge clients tens of millions of dollars. And the banking statements actually show, this is not a number we're making up, the judge's daughter in this case has so far made over $10 million. So basically, the judge is bankrolling his own financial scheme through his daughter by basically prosecuting Donald Trump, because the more information that judge gives her, the more commercials she can make, the more clients she can hire. And of course, with a guilty verdict, she will turn that 10 million into 100 million. And all of that, putting it aside, all of that, even if it were the appearance of that, would be unlawful. The New York State courts have ruled that a judge cannot improperly benefit monetarily within 6 degrees of his family before a case that he's presiding over. This one is the judge and his daughter and his wife, and he still wouldn't recuse.
This cast of characters going after Donald Trump, the Fannie Willis, this judge, I mean, the whole cast of characters here is something that you'd watch on the real world, not something that would exist in the real world. But I want to talk again about something you mentioned when we talked about this guilty verdict. I'm kind of the opinion at this point that if he does get a guilty verdict, that Donald Trump just leans into it. He says, you know what, I'm a convicted felon. He puts out another T-shirt with a mugshot and he says, listen, they came after me, they convicted me, I'm a convicted felon, maybe drop a rap song. I think that you just play into it at this point, and I think that that's what he's done up until this point. But I'm wondering your take on this more politically than legally. If we do get some kind of a conviction in this cockamamie throw spaghetti at the wall situation here, is Donald Trump smart to just wear the hat of a convicted felon and own it?
I think what he's going to do is wear the hat of an unconstitutionally convicted felon and tell the American people that they're coming after you. Look what they did to me, the president of the United States, and the guy who's likely to be the next president. So what makes you think that this two-tier system of justice has just been constructed for Donald Trump? And I think politically, he'll continue to do what he's done brilliantly, which is wear that hat. And if this judge actually puts Donald Trump in prison for one single day, I believe that Donald Trump wins overnight. It is the worst political move that they could possibly do, but they are almost dumb enough and almost vengeful enough and almost hateful enough to tell Donald Trump, you have to go to prison after a felony conviction in this case. But I think you're right. Donald Trump will take whatever they give him and turn it around as a net positive on the political campaign. And you don't have to believe me. Just look at the polls. Whether you like polls or don't like polls, they can't all be going up monumentally if Donald Trump weren't messaging to the American people and they being receptive to what he was saying.
So what happens here if we get a conviction and they put him on house arrest, or he gets a parole officer? I know this is so bizarre to talk about, but let's talk about that. Donald Trump, former president, likely future president, gets a parole officer, and he says to his parole officer, hey, I want to go campaign in Wisconsin, or I got this convention coming up. You know, obviously sentencing is going to take a while, but let's just hypothetically, I need to go do this, I need to go do that. And they've got a crooked parole officer that says, no, we think that you're, you know, too dangerous, you're going to skip town, you can't go. Is that a possibility here, that they could have somebody else in this chain of, I guess I'll call it riggery, that would tie him down and keep him from doing anything?
Well, normally I'd say no, but of course this is completely abnormal. And so they've probably thought of all these schemes. What you would normally have happen if there is a conviction in this case, and because Donald Trump has no criminal history, and because these felonies score so low on the jail sentence scale that it would be a mandatory sentence of probation, that 100 times out of 100 times in a case like this, which of course never been brought, the defendant would be allowed to remain out on bond pending appeal because of the constitutional issues that were litigated. But what they're going to do is strip him of those rights and probably try to bootstrap him with this probationary scheme that you're talking about, or house arrest, or say, you can't leave the state of New York. You have to be in Trump Tower. And when you have to come back to the court for sentencing, we'll allow you to come back to the court for sentencing. But they'll probably try to expedite this process. Look, don't be surprised if there is a conviction, which there shouldn't be, but if there is one, that the judge remands Donald Trump immediately. He might go to that length because he might say, and it's completely false, but Donald Trump's a flight risk and you've been convicted of a felony, so the circumstances have changed and I need to house you at Rikers Island. I mean, this is the lunacy that we're facing. And you're right. We can't allow Americans to be duped into thinking that this is only going to apply to Donald Trump.
So just as your average American watching all of this, I think for me and a lot of Americans, it's a feeling of helplessness, because we keep feeling like what we've all learned growing up with the American justice system is that if something is so wrong like this is, there's got to be somebody that can step in and stop it. And in this case, it just doesn't feel like there's anybody there. It doesn't feel like there's any opportunity for that. It feels like a really helpless feeling of, we know this is a sham. We're watching it happen in front of our very eyes, but it doesn't seem like there's anybody that can stop it. Is there anybody that can stop this? All those things you talked about, the scenarios that this judge could do, the possibility of making him stay in Trump Tower, the possibility of locking him down, sending him to jail. Is there any recourse that he would have before the election to stop this?
In theory, there is and there should be. It would be any single judge who is willing to follow the Constitution. In reality, in the state of New York and their appellate division, is there going to be one that's going to be like Merchan, or is there going to be one that's going to be an actual jurist? And so that's why we have to talk about this reality. Certainly, there's not going to be anyone from the Biden administration or Letitia James's attorney general's office or DA Bragg's office that could shut this down. And remember, the governor could step in and call for an internal audit of how this judge has behaved. Letitia James could call for an audit of the judge's behavior in this case. They could put the whole thing on pause while they investigate any improprieties, many of which we've talked about on your show just now, and hold the verdict off until this case is resolved in terms of extraneous legal matters. But they're not going to do that. They're taking the HOV lane to try to convict Donald Trump. I don't think the appellate courts are going to help him in the immediate future, but there is a federal issue here regarding federal elections law. So that would ultimately go to federal court. But as you said, that's going to take 2-3 years and no one's going to step in before then. The only guy that's fighting the fight is Donald Trump.
Well, there's no better fighter. So at least there's that. but it just feels so helpless. And we have to remind people too, although a lot of the other trials are going to be pushed because, thank goodness for that, this is probably the only one we're going to get before
Mhm.
the election. But let's not forget, he's facing three more. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just wild to even think about. They just really threw everything at this man, and he's still withstanding it, and he's still fighting. But, I'm wondering too, the political side of all of this and what New Yorkers must be thinking when they see illegal immigrants in their hotels, when they see illegal immigrants jumping cops in the street and getting plea deals, when they see people going around and punching innocent people in the face and then getting out and then punching people in the face, even if you are a lefty, liberal New Yorker. How can you possibly say the guy that maybe was involved in paying off a porn star $130,000, which is chump change for Donald Trump? How do you even wrap your mind around, like, yeah, that guy needs to face the music, but all these other people, they are, they're victims of the system.
Yeah, look, many New Yorkers have so much venom against Donald Trump that that's what they unite around is Trump derangement syndrome, clearly what this judge suffers from and Alvin Bragg and company. But I think what you're seeing is the success of Donald Trump shifting many New Yorkers who might have thought like that away from the Biden administration's rigged system of justice to Donald Trump. I mean, look, I'm a New Yorker. I grew up there. When you put 25,000 New Yorkers in Crotona Park, which is 99% full of minorities who have always, always, always voted with the Democrats in the Biden administration, that is a tectonic sea change that Donald Trump pulled off in the state of New York. Then he put 110,000 people on the beach in Jersey, another deep blue state. These are changes not that are like microcosmic, but they are huge and they are occurring throughout the country. So I think the benefit, if there is one, to this insanity is that Donald Trump has taken it and spiked the football in their own end zone to say, I'm going to expose your corrupt activities and I'm going to highlight what you have done worst of all, which is buy the minority vote and done nothing for them. I, Donald Trump, am going to show these people that everyday Americans are treated equally, and he's going to be the president for all of them. So I think the message is just going to keep exploding exponentially. And if there's a verdict, it's going to keep going. And if he goes to jail, it's going to keep going even more so. And I think you're going to see maybe an 84 style, Mondale style election cycle here.
So in terms of that jury, they're in deliberations now. I believe they get out around 4:30 today. If you were to speculate, how quickly do you think this is going to go? Is this going to be tomorrow? Is this going to be this week? Do you think this is going to take a lot of time? I mean, they've got a lot of options, a lot of choices. It's like they're shopping for new cars, really.
I think they come back inside of 24 hours. So by the time it's COB tomorrow is my best guess. And I think they do what we used to call in jury trials, which is split the baby. Since there's 34 counts, they'll probably go back there and say, look, do we really want to spend time going through all this stuff? Or can we just agree that to make Donald Trump guilty of 2 felonies? And then the judge and AD Bragg and the Biden Justice Department will have their victory lap headline saying Donald Trump's guilty of it. So I think most jurors are going to get sick and tired of sitting back there and culling through all this evidence and trying to figure it out, because I think most of them are smart enough to know that the prosecution didn't meet its burden, that Donald Trump is innocent. But I think most New York jurors are going to politicize this just like this judge has done and say we have to have some measure of a conviction here. Otherwise, New York will not like them.
So they got 2 attorneys on the jury. We don't know, which way they lean or whatever. But I would imagine if you're an attorney and you're listening to all of this, as much as you hate Donald Trump, you've got to be listening to this thinking what a joke it is. Do you think that that's going to be a positive for Donald Trump in defense, that you've got 2 attorneys? Do you think even if they hate Donald Trump and even if they want to get a guilty verdict, do you think they're thinking about their career and having to explain to anybody who has any shred of legal expertise that they went along with this? I mean, to me, that would be embarrassing, even if you do consider yourself like a Democrat martyr.
Yeah, and that's just exactly where this is going. Nobody knows who these jurors are now. Everyone is going to know who these jurors are the second the verdict is returned. How many book deals are signed that day? How many media appearances are registered that day? How many cinematic deals are signed that day? And talking about the lawyers on that panel, on that jury panel, they're going to have to go back into the New York community where they're lawyers and face their critics who viciously hate Donald Trump. And their livelihoods are going to be put in jeopardy by the very same venomous people that want to continue a 2-tier system of justice. So I think there's so many other calculations beyond the facts and the law, which is all it should be, and which is all the Constitution says it must be, that these jurors are thinking New York City, media, money, my lifestyle. If I don't convict Donald Trump, I'm going to lose all of it.
That's just so sad that we're in this position.
Mhm.
Speaking of people who are motivated by unhinged lunacy, I watched that Robert De Niro press conference yesterday, and it was embarrassing to watch. I mean, it's you like I was enraged watching it because it was so much BS, but it was actually kind of funny too that they sent him out there and that the Biden Harris team or whatever Gen Z or millennials run that team said, you know what? Let's get 80-year-old Robert De Niro to go out there and talk about safeguarding democracy. Do you think that was a smart play?
No, but the left has always relied on Hollywood to save their derriere. When all the political corruption that's been exposed from Hillary Clinton and Russiagate onto 51 Intel letter, onto January 6th, onto Joe Biden's classified documents case on down, when they fail on the facts and the law, which they always do because they're the ones orchestrating the corrupt activity, you know who they call? Hollywood. They call Hollywood to say, you have to save us. You have to make a movie. You have to make a series. You have to make a speech. You have to go stump with us. And they called Robert De Niro thinking this guy who has played no other role in his career other than a gangster actually went out and was a certified gangster before those microphones and saw their narrative implode. And I just want to remind everyone, the Biden White House called Hollywood and told them to show up to Donald Trump's courthouse with January 6th Capitol Police officers to inject more venom into the mainstream media to rig this case against Donald Trump. That was orchestrated by the Joe Biden White House. That's how far they have fallen from the administration of justice.
And when they sit there and talk about democracy, it's laughable given everything going on. I mean, they know how stupid it is. But I think what really bothers me too is they're still talking about January 6th, and then they want to talk about law enforcement officers and how dare January 6th protesters and rioters, how dare they attack law enforcement. It's like these are the same people that have had so much hatred, venom, and demonization of law enforcement officers on every other day. I mean, I think we just had the anniversary of George Floyd, people, kissing golden caskets and dumping on the police. And then a couple of days later, they stand there with January 6th Capitol police officers and they act like they revere law enforcement. It's just, does anybody, if you're, I don't have a lot of liberal friends. I'm assuming somewhere you do, maybe.
Well, I used to be a public defender, so I used to have a lot of liberal friends, and I'm calling them out as much as you're calling out the cops. Because remember, this is the party that said defund the police, not us, them. And I'm calling out the constitutional due process attorneys that I used to serve with, and they used to call themselves the warriors of justice. Where are you right now when the Constitution is being set on fire? These people are the biggest hypocrites, just as much as the people that pretend to love law enforcement, only to bring that hypocrisy full circle. So I think the liberals are all in one camp. They're all on one island, and they've gone all in. And I think it's going to backfire because even a portion of the liberal community is coming over and saying, look, we might not be able to publicly tell you guys how we feel, but you guys are wrong.
I hope you're right. I fear this because the people that I know that are more on the left that don't really pay attention, they just go bits and pieces. And to me, it's the same thing with Russia, Russia, Russia. When you ask them why they hate Donald Trump, it's like, well, Russia, Russia, Russia. And they couldn't tell you. They couldn't tell you anything about it. They couldn't tell you anything associated with that whole Mueller investigation. But the news told them, CNN and MSNBC, and the New York Times and the Washington Post told them, Russia, 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 Donald Trump's a Russian agent, and they went with it. And my fear is that those same people are going to say, Donald Trump is a convicted felon, he did all these things, and that's my fear. But I guess we don't know, and we have to take that chance because we don't have any other option.
No, you're absolutely right. They're kings of disinformation. They're going to continue the disinformation. They'll continue cranking it beyond the verdict, whichever way it goes. They're going to look, whatever happens, they're going to call Donald Trump a convicted felon. And if he's acquitted, they're going to say this man should be in prison, which is why he can't be in the White House. They're going to come up with more and more and more disinformation to try to scare people into voting. If the rigged system of justice fails them, they're going to continue on and double down. And we got to just keep breaking through that.
And I'll just say this, it's so great to be able to have podcasting and things like this where we're able to talk about these issues,
Mhm.
hopefully wake some people up. But I also just got to say, there was a time after the 2020 election where a lot of people were infuriated with Fox News. And Fox News isn't this, Fox News isn't that. And I just want to remind those people that if not for Fox News right now, there would be no mainstream network that was giving you the truth. Yes, there is podcasters. Yes, there's conservative commentators. But without Fox News right now, there would be such a void in this truthful coverage. So for all those folks that were so disgruntled at Fox News, I hope you've come home, because right now that's pretty much your only mainstream media outlet that's giving you anything. So I just got to say that as somebody who loves my company, but just reminding folks right now how important it is, and important people like yourself, which I'm so blessed and grateful that you took all this time today. I know that you're a hot commodity right now. So thank you so much for spelling all this out for me. As always, Kash, I super appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much, and keep on punching through the wall. We need you.
Always. Thanks so much, Kash. All right, folks. A recent article by Politico suggests the Democrats are freaking out about failing Joe and his failing campaign. But I don't buy the shock or the freak out, and I will tell you why, because it's time for final thoughts. All right, so according to this article from Politico, Democrats across the board are in full-blown freakout mode over Joe Biden, his poll numbers, and his re-election chances against Donald Trump. Now, apparently, Biden advisors, allies, and elected Democrats are shook that their guy, Captain Ice Cream Cone, isn't doing better in swing states or among need-to-win voting blocks. And guess what? I don't buy it. I don't buy that they are in shock, and I don't buy that they are just now starting to panic and look for his replacement. Democrats are a lot of things, but they are not dumb. They are and always have been strategic as hell. And I don't buy for one hot second that they are shocked at the swift downfall of Joe Biden. I contend this is not only not a new revelation, but is always part of their plan. Think about it. They got him elected mail-in ballot style thanks to COVID, and they knew he would be little more than their puppet. They knew he'd go downhill. They knew the policies they put in front of him to co-sign quite literally would tank our country and piss people off, but they needed him to be the fall guy for 4 years until they swap him out for a new model. I know I keep beating this drum, and a lot of you might grow tired of me saying it, but oh well. I do not think Joe Biden will be the Democrat nominee. I think it's going to be Gavin Newsom. And I think it's going to be during the convention or very shortly thereafter, they will make their final bait and switch. So these articles about the full-blown freakouts are just to test the waters and ease people into the idea. Do you really think the party that in a matter of months figured out how to finagle nationwide mail-in ballots and major changes to the voting process are dumb enough just 4 years later to go with bag-o-bones Brandon Biden over there? No. You can be old or a failure, but you can't be both. Biden is their useful idiot and his time is running out. Trump on trial is just an extra insurance plan, and even if it fails, they've got probably 10 more sinister strategies up their sleeves. So never underestimate Democrats, ever. Those are my final thoughts, and guess what? Between now and August, I'll probably deliver those same sentiments another 10 times because I am just that sure of it. But please be sure to tune in tomorrow live at 1 p.m. Eastern. Also, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.